for the introduction, and good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me here to present policy work. We have actually heard quite a bit about institutional measures and actions that individual universities and companies are doing to advance gender equality, diversity, and inclusion. And I will be speaking today from the other side, from policy. And let me tell you, I think policy is really important because it sets the framework for what institutions and individuals within those institutions can do. And you will realize from my talk that in those countries where the policy framework is less than ideal or non-existent, it's actually really difficult for the gender equality practitioners and institutions to move forward with the agenda. I am speaking here today as the chair of the ERAC Standing Working Group on Gender in Research and Innovation, which is an advisory body to the Council and the European Commission on issues of gender equality in research and innovation, as the title suggests. And what I will present here today is our current work into analyzing the implementation of Council conclusions on advancing gender equality in the European research area. Gender equality is one of the priorities of the European research area. So just a few words, sorry. Yes, okay. A few words to introduce our group. The group brings together delegates appointed by national authorities in member states and associated countries. And as I said, we advise the Council and the Commission. And what we focus on is how gender equality is implemented in the dominant funding program in Europe, Horizon 2020, what member states are doing to advance gender equality through the so-called national action plans and strategies, which are in place to advance the so-called ERA roadmap. And we're also looking into the implementation of these Council conclusions. The group builds on the European Commission's previous Helsinki Group on Gender in Research Innovation, which was established in 1999. And so next year we will be celebrating 20 years of European activities at policy level to advance gender equality in research. And it's quite a long time. And as someone who joined these efforts in 2001, very young, at the very beginning of my career, long before I got my PhD, I can tell you, we have achieved huge things in Europe, but also it has been an uphill battle, and we need constant vigilance to keep the issue on track. So some of the recent work that we have been doing in the group is we developed together with the Commission guidance to facilitate the implementation of guiding targets to promote gender equality in research and innovation. With the Strategic Forum for International Cooperation in Science and Technology, we have delivered a report on joint guidelines for integrating gender perspective in international cooperation in science, technology, and innovation. We have also prepared a policy brief on tackling gender bias in research evaluation, and we are just finalizing the report that I will be presenting here today. And some of the upcoming tasks that we want to focus on is to look into gender and innovation, and specifically open innovation. And this is something that we will be doing this fall. And our major topic for next year is sexual harassment and sexual violence in academia, with a particular focus on international mobility. Because international academic mobility is a huge part of the academic experience. And if mobility is to be the fifth freedom of Europe, we need to ensure that early career researchers can travel in Europe safely without the dangers of sexual harassment and sexual assault in academia. Sorry. So for the work that we are doing now, to carry out the analysis of the Council conclusions, we carried out an online survey among the members of the group. And we focused on the topics that get covered in the Council conclusions, which is the legislative and policy environment, how members are implementing the ERA roadmap, then whether and how countries are implementing cultural and institutional changes for gender equality, what they are doing for gender balance in decision making, and what they are doing to advance gender knowledge and monitoring. And we carried out the analysis according to clusters. One was the old versus new member states and associated countries, because we can all presume that there might be differences, but also according to the EU Innovation Scoreboard. And this is where it gets interesting. So gender equality is clearly a Central European value. It's a value which underlies our democracies, responsibility to the world and to the environment. But it is also a value that contributes to innovation. The innovative capacity of European states increases with incremental increases in gender equality. There is a correlation between the EU Innovation Scoreboard and the Gender Equality Index. There is also a correlation between the dynamic of the growth of the women's proportion among researchers and innovators and the country's innovative capacity. So shortly, innovation and gender go hand in hand. Importantly, there's also negative correlation between the proportion of women among researchers and the EU Innovation Scoreboard. And this may come as a surprise, but this underscores the importance of resources and refers to something that European Commission's expert group, NWISE, in 2003 called honeypot indicator, which basically says if you have money coming into the system, you may have lesser proportion of women because women stay in systems that get less funding. And we really need to address this because the proportion of women among researchers is not an answer in and of itself, and we need to address this issue of resources and power. So the Gender Equality Index has really a high degree of correlation expressed by the Pearson correlation coefficient at the level of 0.87. And so here we can see the distribution of the countries and the difference between the old and new member states, because the innovative capacity maps onto the distinction between the old and new member states. And I think that this graph tells the story quite clearly. So let me get on with the analysis of the implementation, which will just basically tell a very similar story. In terms of the legal and policy environment, we really wanted to see what the impact of the Council conclusions was at the national level. So 2 member states amended their national policies. The Nordic countries typically indicated that they had measures in place already prior to the Council conclusions. So they are doing all of this for some time. For 10 countries, they adopted a new policy document in response to the Council conclusions. And for 8 of those countries, the document that they adopted was the ERA roadmap for national action plans and strategies. And in many cases, this ERA roadmap document was the first policy document to address gender equality in research and innovation, and this is particularly true among the new member states. So we can immediately see the importance of having a policy push to pay attention to the issue of gender equality and the importance of policy coordination at the EU level. In terms of the cultural and institutional changes, the innovation leaders, and let me say, the innovation scoreboard clusters countries into 4 clusters. Innovation leaders, strong innovators, moderate and modest innovators. So the 2 highest groups, innovation leaders and strong innovators, have more measures towards gender equality than moderate and modest innovators. And the difference is particularly noticeable between strong and moderate innovators, which is also where most of the countries are. Incentives to research performing organizations such as universities and research centers to develop gender equality plans are provided by a majority of strong innovators and innovation leaders. Fewer incentives go to gender dimension in research, but they are there. For strong innovators, we're the only countries to have national guiding targets for gender balance among professors. And this is perhaps not so surprising. The national funding agencies are more proactive in battling gender bias in research evaluation because they are dealing with evaluative practices. And in this graph, you can see how stark the difference is between the strong innovators and innovation leaders in terms of implementing cultural and institutional changes and the modest and moderate ones. The difference is huge. For gender balance in decision-making positions, we have 2 innovation leaders, Finland and Netherlands, and 7 strong innovators out of 9, so a high proportion, that have guiding targets for gender balance in decision-making bodies. But only 2 out of 9 moderate innovators do. None of the modest ones, of course, have something like this. For the gender knowledge and monitoring, out of the 16 countries that indicated that gender policies and actions are monitored at national level, 10 have indicators to monitor progress. And this is corroborated by analysis of, performed by other people. We very often put in place policies, but do not monitor what is being done. And if we do monitor, we do not have indicators to measure how. So here we have a long way to go. Only 8 countries evaluate the implementation of gender policies and actions at national level. Those are Estonia, France, Germany, Norway, Slovenia, Spain, Switzerland, and Turkey. Only 6 countries, 4 old member states, and 2 associate countries provide dedicated support for gender research at the national level. None of the new member states has dedicated funding for gender research. And innovative leaders are more likely to support gender research in their countries compared to all the other clusters. So clearly, important steps have been made in several EU countries and their national research funding organizations, as well as at the EU level. But our analysis, as well as other analyses that are going on, show that the gap increases and persists between higher and lower innovators. Innovation leaders and strong innovators have more policies in place, have more concrete measures in place, have dedicated funding in place, and are more likely to have targets and quotas for decision-making positions. We can see some positive developments in few member states, new member states, which is Slovenia and very recently also the Czech Republic. But we can see backlash and stagnation in others. And those are usually the countries with high proportions of women among researchers. And the high proportion of women among researchers serves as the argument for why the country is not doing anything. Look at our numbers. We have 47% of women among researchers. Why should we do anything? We have 25% of women professors. Why should we do anything? So the barriers that were mentioned in the survey to the implementation of cultural changes were typically for the new member states, lack of political will, cultural barriers, or gender equality not being a priority. For the other countries, very often institutional autonomy was mentioned as a barrier. So the perceived autonomy and inability of the state to make incursions into the academic environment to universities. So our recommendations are really work in progress. We will be, in fact, discussing our report next week at a meeting. So these will get developed further. But one clear suggestion is that national authorities need to provide financial incentives to implement cultural and institutional changes through gender equality plans. And I think Gary Loke yesterday spoke very vehemently about the power of money. Now the Horizon Europe, the next funding program, is being negotiated, and it has a section that is dedicated to strengthening the European research area. And within this, there has been historically and will be a funding line to bridge the gap between countries that are participating less in the framework program and those that have good participation rates. So what we want to suggest very strongly is that if the countries that are underperforming want to touch this money, they have to do something for gender equality. They have to, together with whatever they want to do, also implement actions for gender equality. We are also looking into whether and how we could use the policy support facility to bridge this continued gap between the countries. And also, we need dedicated funding for research to explore the link between innovation and gender equality. I don't think that we have enough understanding. What I presented is a very simple correlation between the scoreboard and the gender equality index. We need to look into what this means. So to conclude, we are really at an important time, and we must act to secure gender equality for the future. In some countries, academic freedom is coming under attack. Gender research is labeled as ideological, and scientific facts are discounted and even ridiculed. And the research community must really stand with policymakers to defend the core values of research, which is also, of course, rewarding the best, rewarding the talent, and making sure that we can all contribute with what we have. Engagement at all levels is really crucial, and here I would like to call on you to get in touch with your policymakers, get in touch with your national representative in the Standing Working Group, and support each other at national level. This is very important for us as people who are engaged at policy level, because we need the support from people in, gender practitioners, gender researchers, and see, what the policymakers can do for you. If you can, engage, and now is really the time with your members of the European Parliament, because we are in final stages of negotiating Horizon Europe, and if we do not push now, the measures will not be there that were in Horizon 2020, and this will be a huge step back. We don't know what will happen with the European Parliament elections next year. We need to have gender equality in the legislative document. There is also a project that I coordinate, Gender Action. We're trying to push this also with the support of this project, so you can get in touch with what we have been doing, the policy briefs on Horizon Europe and other activities. Huge steps have been made forward. And as I said, I can judge. But also, it's a continued battle. Gender equality is not a linear endeavor, and you all know that. And we really need to act now to make sure that what we have achieved can continue in the upcoming period. Thanks a lot.
Can we stay for some questions?
Claudine Herman, I have been a member of the Helsinki group from its foundation until my retirement, so it's old story, but at that time the impetus given by Europe was absolutely essential, in particular in my country, France. It's because of Europe that there were some parity missions settled, and I think for the new countries it is the same, so it is very important to follow Marcela and to help her in what she's asking at the end.
Any more questions from the audience? So we just thank you, Marcela.
Okay.
See you soon. Wait. What?